On April 30, 1945, at 3:30 p.m., Adolf Hitler, Germany's tyrannical ruler and the orchestrator of the murder of 6 million Jews, suddenly placed a gun to his own head. And just like that, it was all over. Hitler committed suicide. However, Hitler was not the only one to die that day. Prior to his own death, he also killed 3 people who were dear to him. The plan to kill these 3 individuals was set in motion exactly 24 hours before Hitler's demise, on April 29, 1945, at 3 p.m. Hitler ordered his soldiers to open the jaws of his beloved German shepherd, Blondie. Then, with his own hands, he placed a cyanide capsule inside her mouth. The moment the poison entered her system, Blondie died instantly. Blondie was Hitler's most cherished animal companion, one he had raised from puppyhood as if she were his own child. The question now arises, why did Hitler kill the dog he regarded as his son? In truth, Hitler did not wish to kill her, yet, despite his reluctance, he did so for 2 primary reasons. First and foremost, Hitler was testing the potency of the cyanide capsule. He needed to verify its efficacy because exactly 24 hours later, he intended to administer that very capsule to his bride, Eva Braun, whom he had married just 15 hours earlier. A second, equally significant reason concerned the Russians, into whose hands Hitler knew he would soon fall. He feared that following his death, the Russians might vent their fury upon his beloved dog, that no one would spare her from suffering or torment once he was gone. Driven by this fear, Hitler opened his beloved dog's mouth and with trembling hands and immense anguish, placed the poison inside. Immediately after her death, Hitler, his eyes clouded with sorrow, buried his beloved Blondie in the garden where he used to play with her. We now understand why he killed his dog, but the next question is, why did he kill his wife, Eva Braun? What compelling reason lay behind this act? Hitler knew that his final hour was fast approaching. The Russian forces had encircled him from every direction. However, determined not to surrender to the Russian forces, he decided to take his own life. So why then did he get married just 15 hours earlier? Granted, one might argue, he was certainly free to marry, but the question remains, why did he kill his new bride, Eva Braun, immediately after the wedding? Well, to understand this story, we must go back a few hours prior to Hitler's death. On April 29th at midnight, 32-year-old Eva Braun adorned herself in her bedroom, wearing a long black dress, a diamond watch, a gold bracelet, and a necklace, dressed in her finest attire. For in just a few short hours, she was to marry the man who had been her lover for 16 years. In fact, Eva had fallen in love with Hitler when she was merely 15 years old. 2 years later, when she was 17, Hitler finally accepted her romantic overtures. Yet, Hitler was such an autocratic ruler that he refused to reveal his private romantic life to the outside world. He strove to project an image to the entire globe that his country was the sole object of his deepest affection. Consequently, he presented Eva to the world merely as his best friend. Only a select few of Hitler's trusted officers knew that they were in fact a couple. They maintained separate bedrooms. However, situated between these 2 rooms were 2 bathrooms, one of which contained a connecting passageway. It was through this passage that Hitler would occasionally visit Eva in her bedroom. Consider this as a testament to the depth of Hitler's love for Eva. Even amidst the frenetic demands of wartime, Hitler would call her every day to check on her well-being. Furthermore, whenever Eva went out for sporting activities and returned late, he would be consumed with worry and unable to sleep. He would become visibly agitated. This particular detail was known only to his inner circle of trusted officers. Eva's biographer, Heike B. Gortemecker, notes in her writings that, on occasion, they were indeed intimate and shared moments of deep affection. Yet, despite this, they never lived openly as a conventional couple. There were 2 primary reasons. Hitler knew that he would never be able to devote adequate time to a wife, and, more importantly, he knew that he could never become a father. Due to the stress, medication, and drugs Hitler consumed, his fertility rate declined significantly. Secondly, he possessed only one testicle. For this reason, he was unable to father children. Yet, despite this, their love was in no way inferior to that of Romeo and Juliet. They would occasionally go on dates. Hitler was extremely caring towards Eva. He did not permit her to smoke or consume alcohol, nor did he allow her to meet with anyone in public. The question now arises, why did Hitler believe he could not devote adequate time to his wife? And why specifically did Hitler prefer not to let Eva appear in public? The primary reason was that at that time, the Russians were relentlessly bent on subduing Germany. There was a constant threat that at any moment they might launch an attack on Germany and kill them. It was for this very reason that 24 hours prior to his death, while Eva was preparing to tie the knot, Hitler sat in his bunker engrossed in reading his last will and testament. It was there that he made the decision to marry his beloved just hours before his own demise. Furthermore, they resolved that on the following day, April 30th, they would voluntarily commit suicide, for he refused to bow down before the Russians. In fact, his will explicitly stipulated that following their deaths, both their bodies were to be cremated immediately so that the enemy would be unable to discover their remains. This constituted one of the most momentous decisions in history. Moreover, this was not a decision Hitler made alone. Rather, with the full consent of his wife, Eva, he formally announced it on April 29th during lunch at 2 p.m. As Hitler, Eva, and his two secretaries sat at the lunch table, Hitler did something so unexpected that even his secretaries were taken aback. Hitler, in fact, had a strict rule. No one was permitted to discuss serious topics during meals. Yet, on that particular day, Hitler himself, quite uncharacteristically, violated his own self-imposed rule. Suddenly, Hitler declared that he could see his end looming right before his eyes, and that both he and Eva wished to commit suicide rather than surrender to the Germans. He further stated that he intended to use a gun to end his life because he believed it would be the least painful method. Eva immediately interjected, declaring that before taking her own life, she wished to dress up and adorn herself for Hitler so that she might appear beautiful even in death. She expressed a strong aversion to dying in a pool of blood. Consequently, she chose to use a cyanide capsule as her means of suicide. In accordance with the instructions outlined in the first clause of his will, Hitler married Eva at 1 a.m. Following the wedding at 2:30 a.m., Hitler hosted a party to which he invited his doctor, nurses, two secretaries, and Eva. Deeply intoxicated from drinking at the party, Hitler suddenly announced that he wished to die alongside Eva at the very same moment. To fulfill this desire, Hitler devised a unique plan. According to the plan, before their death, they would take 2 pistols and 2 cyanide capsules, rather than just one of each, to ensure a backup option existed in case a pistol misfired or a capsule failed to take effect. Their party continued throughout the night. Afterward, Hitler and Eva entered Hitler's private quarters together. This marked the first time in their lives that the two lovers found themselves alone together inside a closed room, for they both knew that this was to be their final meeting and their final night. In truth, that night was meant to be Hitler's wedding night, yet this night of supreme joy for Hitler was destined to last only until dawn. For at 6 a.m. on April 30th, Hitler received news that Russian troops had reached the Reichstag and had in fact already brought the building under their control. Upon hearing this devastating news, Hitler appeared utterly shattered. He seemed to see his own demise and the grave awaiting him with stark clarity. Nevertheless, Hitler clung to a glimmer of hope. Perhaps the Russians would withdraw their troops from the Reichstag. But all of Hitler's hopes were washed away when one of his commanders informed him over the phone that the Russians were advancing towards their position from the Reichstag with even greater speed. Then, at 12:30 p.m., Hitler received yet another piece of grim news. The area surrounding the bunker where he had been hiding had been completely overrun by the Russians. Upon hearing this report, Hitler appeared utterly broken. He displayed no reaction, no emotion, nor did he wish to listen to a word from anyone. And when he finally opened his mouth, he uttered but a single phrase that under no circumstances he wished to end up as a museum exhibit. For this very reason, he intended to take his own life before surrendering to the Russians. He further issued orders to his officers that after his death, his body was to be incinerated and reduced to ashes, ensuring that the Russians would be unable to find even the slightest trace of him. At 12:45 p.m., Hitler shook hands with his soldiers and expressed his gratitude for their assistance and loyalty. Afterward, Hitler fell completely silent, so silent, in fact, that he did not utter another word until the moment of death. Following his meeting with the soldiers, Hitler sat down at the dining table to partake of his last meal, spaghetti and salad. At this time, Hitler